Thanks for checking out this horror debate series video. If you're new to this, I just want you to know that you can watch this video, then follow the link in my description to go to your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete's channel and watch his video of the same name. Get his pick for what you think is the best horror movie in which nobody dies. And then you can come back here, go to my community tab, and you can vote on who you think had the best argument or who you agree with more, or however you want to do that. There's also a tie option if you want to go with that, because some people ask for it. So getting into it, best horror movie that is, in which nobody dies. My pick has to be April Fool's Day. Now, this is a movie that actually I've already reviewed on my channel before in depth. If you want to check out that review, you can just put in the search Carlin Cook April Fool's Day. It'll come up. I liked the movie when I reviewed it, but I wasn't really super into it. But this is one of those movies that over time and after watching a second time, maybe even third, fourth, whatever, it gets better and better and better. And one of the main reasons I've chosen this one as the best for, a horror movie in which nobody dies is the manner in which they go about making sure that no one dies, but also making it a very compelling film and a very compelling story. Although there's no gore, really. That was one of my biggest issues in my review was, where is the gore? We need gore for this. But there is obviously actually a reason, which I'll end up talking about. So just so people know, obviously getting into spoilers on this, so if you have not seen April Fool's Day and you want to, go and watch it, then you can come back and watch this, but I have to get into spoilers in order to make my arguments for this one, unfortunately. So, April Fool's Day. I believe this was put out by Scream Factory, by the way. Oh yeah, has it on the back. So anyway, let's talk about April Fool's Day. The acting is very good, and it makes the character relationships extremely interesting. That's one of the great things about this film. I think it's the biggest strength of this film, other than the very clever aspect of the story, which I'll get to in a little bit. The cast was so well put together. You feel the relationships that they've forged here. You feel like they are in real life actual friends. And it's not just that, the way they're talking to each other seems realistic. The way they're interacting with each other seems realistic. It's super well written, and you could see them being actual people. And it adds so much to the story. It really sucks you into it. The fake mental institution documents that they end up throwing into this and creation of the character of Buffy ends up selling a false narrative. The false narrative that's at play in this film, which I'll talk about even more, but I'll just go ahead and say it right now. In the end of this film, if you've watched it, you know this, the whole film is a prank, basically. It starts with people playing pranks, and this friend group is very big into playing pranks with each other. But it seems like it's just kind of like low-key pranks, although some of them seem to kind of like push the boundaries here and there, but they're huge into it. And the whole idea behind the film is people are dying on this secluded island where they have this getaway house, which I believe was the character Muffy's parents' place, and people are dying, getting picked off one by one in a non-bloody fashion because they're not actually dying. This is all staged. It's one giant elaborate prank on a few characters. And why these people would then stay friends with these people afterwards, I don't know. But it definitely makes for a very compelling concept. So the fact that they throw in something like there's a fake mental institution document that pops up that's supposed to create the perception that Muffy actually either has a dual personality or has a twin sister named Buffy, which is, I'm saying that because the audience could think either way, but the intention was to make you believe that there was a twin named Buffy who actually wasn't in a mental institution, got out, and most likely that's the person going around picking everyone off. So I think it was very smart to kind of put things like that in. There are a lot of these red herrings that try and bolster that false narrative, and I think they did it actually really well in the film. The beginning portion of the film sets up the pranking nature of the characters, which actually doesn't seem super significant at the time, but it obviously ends up being huge. It is this hint at what's to come, but you don't really know when you go into it. Maybe some people figured this out about the film the first time they watched it, but I figure things out about films very early on a lot because of the way that I choose to watch films. I'm very, very keyed into what's going on and try to pick things apart. But this one got me. It really did fool me, and that I think that that's a great thing because it actually makes the experience of the film a lot better. If you already know what's happening going into it the first time you watch it, it's not going to be nearly as interesting or have as great of a payoff. But it does have a great payoff when you actually get to the end if you don't catch on. But I just love the fact that they kind of like put the pranking in there and they're like, yes, this is who these people are. They prank each other. And you think it's just like a light, fun thing to throw in there just to give you an idea of the relationships that these characters have, which works in that aspect as well. But it's so much more. It's literally winking at people watching it for the second time, most likely saying, see, we basically told you they like to do pranks, and that's what's going to be at play here. There are plenty of clues as to what's really going on in the film, like the pranking thing, the initial pranking, and Muffy being said to be a great actor. That's another thing that ends up getting thrown out there. This makes for a much better rewatch of the film. This film has great rewatch value because you can see all these little hints that the filmmaker threw in there to be like, see, we're giving you a little bit to let you know what's actually at play here. And most likely you're not picking that up the first time you watch it because you don't know ultimately where it's going. You do want to believe that it's straight up horror and the people actually are getting picked off. So this is one of those things where on a second viewing, third viewing, whatever, is when you're really going to pick up on these things and be like, oh, this was a little hint here. This was a little clue here. And that's what I'm saying. It's like these kind of Easter eggs. It makes the film very rewatchable. The deaths in this film actually look so real that you literally think people are being picked off, and you think that this is kind of going to be a regular slasher film, albeit a regular slasher film that doesn't have gore in it. So this is PG-13, and I really do think that this was kind of, I'll talk about it more in a bit, but kind of a smart way to do a story for a PG-13 horror film, because a lot of times when people watch PG-13 horror, myself included, I will be like, oh, that was pretty good, but what would make it better? Gore, viscera, having actual like interesting, like over-the-top gruesome kills. This film, at least with the first viewing for me, really leaves you wanting for that, but until you find out what's actually at play here. But I do think that they made the kills look good and look interesting enough. My favorite of which is the one where there's two people who are starting to get it on like this boathouse, and there's like wood on the floor, but in between the slats you can see, and one of the people's bodies just kind of like floats in under them. The way they shot that just looks phenomenal. And then like the head in the well, that's another thing that comes up. So good. The lack of gore is frustrating at first, but is easily forgiven because of the ending of the film. This is a very smart way to make a PG-13 film. The reason being what I was saying before is that if you are going into a PG-13 film, you're expecting, okay, we're not going to get a whole lot of gore. We're not going to get great kills out of here. And that's one of the biggest disappointments. That's a reason a lot of people won't watch PG-13 horror films or go into a PG-13 horror film with pretty low expectations, especially if you're a person who enjoys gore. Now, with this, it literally can make you feel like that, but as soon as it gets to the end of the film, it's like, well, but no one actually died. And then it's like, okay, well then that's why there really was no gore. Now, granted, they could have done like fake blood and stuff, but it still works without that, honestly. And it's, I just think, a very smart way to kind of say, yeah, you may not have loved the fact that it's like no gore, but there's a very important reason to the story that is the case. And then the last thing I want to say is it ultimately is the title of the film. It is April Fool's Day. It is a prank, as people do on April Fools, although I think that's going more by the wayside as time goes on. But it's not just a prank for the characters. It's not just April Fool's Day for the characters, because it literally is a situation where the film has pranked the audience. And that's one of the most brilliant things about this movie. How many times can you say that what has happened to the characters has happened to the audience at the same time? I mean, I know people experience things through the characters a lot of time, and they'll just basically be like, oh, I feel like I'm in it with the character. I'm feeling these same emotions. But literally, the characters were pranked, and at the same time, you were pranked. Because you believe that this, or most likely, not necessarily, but most likely, you believe this was a straight-up slasher film just with no blood. But in the end, you were pranked. It's not. It's actually a farce. This whole thing is false. It was all an elaborate prank, and the characters feel duped, and the audience feels duped. But the audience feels better about it because it wasn't their friends who did this to them in real life. So, anyway, those are my reasons for picking April Fool's Day. Really, if you have not seen this film, you really, really should. It's very interesting, to say the least. But go ahead and put some comments down here on my video, on Uncle Pete's video, and let us know, A, what you thought of our picks, and B, probably more importantly, what your pick would be for the best film in which nobody dies. And yeah, go ahead and do the voting and all that. Please do us a favor, subscribe to both our channels. We appreciate that. That's the best way to repay us for all this free content we're putting out. Put likes on these videos or any videos we're putting out if you want to help us with the YouTube algorithm. And you can hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when we're putting up new videos, which we're doing a decent amount. We're putting in work. But regardless, thanks for being involved with this. We really appreciate it. And until next time, keep it brutal.